The great hall was filled with alien voices, their laughter heavy like thunder. Bright torches burned on the tall stone walls, and banners of many clans hung high. At the center stood a human man, alone, calm, his eyes watching without fear. His clothes were simple, his boots covered in dust. He looked out of place among warriors in shining armor and long flowing robes. But he stood tall before him. The alien warlord rose from his throne, his skin dark and scaled, his horns sharp like blades. His eyes cold with cruelty, he raised a hand and the crowd went silent. "This is what you humans deserve," the warlord hissed, his voice cutting through the hall. He clapped his hands, and two guards dragged forward a small figure. It was a girl, alien in blood but weak in body, her legs thin, her arms trembling, her eyes wide with fear. She looked no older than 10 seasons, her hair dull, her skin pale. She tried to walk but stumbled, and the crowd roared with laughter. "She is broken, useless, weak," the warlord declared, his lips curling in a sneer. "No warrior, no fighter. Nothing but shame," he pointed at the human. "Take her, she is your gift." The human did not move. The hall shook with mocking cheers. Some aliens shouted insults, others spat on the floor. The girl lowered her head, shame burning her cheeks. She knew she was nothing more than a joke. But then something strange happened. The human stepped forward, slow but steady, his eyes not filled with anger, not with shame, but with something the girl had never seen before: calm fire. He placed his hand gently on the girl's shoulder. She flinched, expecting rejection, expecting to be pushed away, but instead, he bent down so his eyes met hers. "What is your name?" he asked softly, his voice steady. The hall went quiet for a moment, whispers rippled through the crowd. None of them expected him to speak to her like that. The girl stammered, her lips dry. Lyra, she whispered, as if even her name was too heavy to carry. "Lyra," the human repeated, his voice firm this time. "Stand with me." The warlord laughed so hard the throne shook. "Stand with you? She can barely walk," he mocked. "You take her, and she will be your burden until she dies. She will bring you nothing but disgrace. This is my insult to you." "Human!" The crowd exploded with laughter again, many slapping their knees, others pointing at the human and the girl. The sound was cruel, sharp, endless. But the human did not laugh, he did not answer. He simply lifted the girl in his arms. She gasped in surprise, her small hands clutching his chest, and for the first time in her life, she felt weightless, not from weakness, but because someone had chosen to carry her. He turned without a word and began walking out of the hall. Every step echoing on the stone floor, the crowd kept mocking, calling him fool, coward, cursed father, weak blood, but he did not stop. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Why?" she asked in a broken voice. "Why would you take me? I am nothing." The human glanced down, his expression unreadable, but his voice was strong. "Because they are wrong," he said. "They don't see who you are." "But I do." Those words struck her like a spark in the dark. Her heart trembled. She had heard only scorn her whole life. Never kindness, never belief, never hope. But this man, this human, had spoken to her as if she mattered. Behind them, the warlord's laughter echoed. "Go, human, carry your shame. You will regret this day." The heavy doors closed, shutting out the jeers, leaving only silence and the sound of footsteps on the night road. The torches outside flickered in the cold wind, and the stars above glowed bright and distant. The girl leaned her head against the human's chest, her voice a whisper. "They said I cannot fight. They said I am weak." The human stopped, looking at the endless sky, then down at her, his jaw tight, his voice unshaken. "Then we will prove them wrong," he said. "Not tomorrow, not in a year, but one day. They will remember your name." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they were not from shame. They were from something else, something new, something burning inside her chest, hope. And so the insult gift became the first step of a story the galaxy would never forget. The road was long, dark, and cold. The night wind cut through the silence like a knife. The human carried the small alien girl in his arms until they reached a lonely campfire outside the city walls. He placed her gently near the fire, her body shivering, her thin arms hugging herself, her eyes still swollen from tears. She looked around, afraid of every shadow, afraid of every sound. The human poured water into a small cup and handed it to her. "Drink," he said, his voice calm but firm. Lyra hesitated, her fingers trembling. She looked at him with doubt, then slowly sipped the water. It felt warm against her dry throat for a moment. She forgot the laughter of the hall, the cruel words of the warlord, but the memories returned quickly. Her chest tightened, her voice cracked. "Why did you take me?" she asked, her eyes lowered. "I am useless, weak, everyone knows it. You should have left me there." The human sat down across from her, his face steady in the glow of the fire. "You are not useless," he said. "They only told you that so many times that you started to believe it." Her eyes widened slightly. No one had ever spoken like that to her. Her own people had mocked her since birth. They called her broken child, cursed child. Some even said she should have been left to die. She lowered her face again. Hiding her shame, the human leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Do you know why they gave you to me?" She shook her head slowly, her hair falling over her face. "Because I'm a joke," she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, they wanted to insult me. They wanted to give me something they thought was worthless. But what they don't know is this. Sometimes what others throw away is what has the most value." Her heart trembled at his words, but her mind fought back. She whispered again, "But I cannot fight. I cannot even walk without falling." The human's eyes glinted in the firelight. He reached down and picked up a stick. He placed it in her small hands. "Hold it," he ordered. Her fingers shook as she wrapped them around the rough wood. It felt heavy even though it was just a stick. "Now raise it," he said. She tried, her arms lifted slowly, but soon they quivered. The stick fell to the ground with a soft thud. Shame rushed into her chest, her face burned. "See?" she cried. "I told you I am nothing, I cannot do anything." The human stood, his shadow stretching across the firelight. "You failed because you have never tried before," he said firmly. "Failure is not weakness. Staying on the ground after failing is weakness." His words struck her like a sudden blow. She looked at him, her eyes wide with confusion. No one had ever told her failure was part of strength. Everyone before had used her weakness as proof she was worthless. The human picked up the stick and handed it back. "Again," he said, her lips trembled, "but I will fail again." "Then fail again," he said sharply. "Fail 100 times, fail 1,000 times. But one day you will not fail, and that is the day they will see who you really are." His words lit a tiny flame inside her chest. Small but real, she lifted the stick again. Her arms shook. Sweat formed on her forehead, but this time she held it a little longer before it dropped. She gasped for air, her chest rising and falling. And for the first time in her life, she felt something strange, pride. The human crouched beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Good," he said, his tone calm but strong. "Tomorrow you will do better, and the day after that, better still." Her eyes filled with tears. But these were different from the tears of shame she had cried in the hall. These were tears of something new, something fragile. Why do you believe in me?" she asked in a whisper. The human looked at her with eyes that held no doubt. "Because I see a warrior in you," he said. "The galaxy laughs now, but one day, they will fear your name." The words sank deep into her heart. Shaking her very soul, she hugged the stick tightly to her chest, as if it was the first real treasure she ever owned. That night, as the fire burned low and the stars glimmered above, Lyra lay down on the rough blanket he gave her. Her body weak, her arms aching, but her mind awake. She thought of his words again and again. "Fail 1,000 times, but one day you will not fail." For the first time in her short life, the broken child began to dream, not of death, not of shame, but of strength and somewhere in the dark. The human watched the flames and whispered to himself, "They gave me an insult, but I will turn her into a blade the galaxy will never forget." The sun had barely touched the horizon when the human's voice broke the silence of the camp. "Wake up, Lyra," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for questions. The alien girl stirred, her body still sore from the small practice of the night before. Her arms felt heavy, her legs weak. Every part of her wanted to curl back under the thin blanket and sleep. But the human stood tall above her, already awake, already ready. And there was something in his steady gaze that made her sit up slowly, even when her body screamed to stay down. "Stand," he said. She pushed herself to her feet, wobbling, her knees shaking, her breath shallow. She felt as if she would fall at any moment. The human handed her a wooden stick again, longer this time, carved roughly from a branch. "This will be your weapon for now," he said. "It is nothing, but if you can master nothing, then one day you will master everything." She gripped the stick with trembling hands, the memory of last night's failure still burning in her mind. But she remembered his words, "Fail 1,000 times," and so she nodded. Swing, he commanded. She raised the stick clumsily and swung, the motion weak, slow, without aim. The stick barely cut through the air. Again, he ordered. She swung again, her arms already aching, the weight pulling her down. Again, his voice echoed, calm but sharp. She kept swinging over and over, each attempt just as weak as the last, her hands blistering, her breath quickening, sweat dripping down her pale skin. Finally, she dropped the stick, falling to her knees, gasping. "I can't," she cried. "I'm too weak. I'll never be like the others." The human crouched before her, his eyes unblinking, his voice steady. "Good," he said, surprising her. "Now you know what weakness feels like. But listen well, Lyra. Weakness is not your end. It is your beginning." Her eyes widened, her chest still rising and falling. She stared at him, not fully understanding. He picked up the stick, pressed it into her hands again. "Every swing you make is one step away from weakness. Every failure you face is one step closer to strength. One day, those who laugh at you will not laugh anymore." Her hands tightened around the stick. Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, even if her body screamed otherwise. "Again," he commanded. She stood shakily and swung, her form poor, her body trembling. But she did it, once, twice, 3 times, until she collapsed again. But this time, she fell with the stick still in her hands. The human did not smile, but his eyes softened slightly. "Better," he said. "Tomorrow you will swing more. The day after, more still." As the days passed, training became her life. Mornings filled with swings, afternoons with running, evenings with lifting small stones and carrying water. Her body ached. Her blisters grew into calluses, her legs burned with fire. Many times she fell, many times she cried, but each time the human made her stand again. "Do not stop," he said. "The moment you stop is the moment they win." Sometimes she hated him for it. Sometimes she wanted to throw the stick and scream. But when she saw his steady eyes, when she heard the quiet strength in his voice, she could not quit. One evening, after a week of endless drills, she collapsed beside the fire, her body drenched in sweat. Her face streaked with dirt, she whispered, "Why do you push me so hard? I am still weak. I still fail." The human stared at the flames, his voice low but powerful. "Because strength is not born in comfort, it is born in pain, in struggle, in refusing to give up when everything inside you begs to quit. I do not want you to be strong for me, Lyra. I want you to be strong for yourself." Her chest tightened. Her eyes burned. She turned her face away so he would not see her tears. But deep inside, she felt something changing. That night, as she held the stick close, she whispered to herself, "I will not stop. I will not stop." The next morning, when the human told her to swing, she did. Not once, not 10 times, but 20. Each swing weak, but each one louder than the last. Her breath ragged, but her eyes burning brighter. The human finally gave a small nod, his lips almost curving. "Good," he said quietly. "You are no longer just a broken child, you are becoming something more." Lyra's chest filled with a strange warmth, a spark of pride, a spark of fire. She still stumbled, still fell, but now every time she stood again, she felt the ground shake a little less beneath her, and in the shadows of the training ground a few villagers watched from afar, whispering to one another, "The weak girl? Training? It will never work." But one of them frowned as he watched her swing again and again, sweat dripping, body trembling yet refusing to stop. "Or maybe," he whispered, "it already has begun." The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Lyra's body was still thin, her arms still small, but there was something different in her eyes now. A fire every morning she swung her stick until her hands bled. Every evening she ran until her legs gave out, and every night she whispered to herself, "I will not stop." The human watched her with quiet patience. He never praised too much, he never mocked, only guided, only pushed, his calm voice always steady. "Again, Lyra, again." One morning, The sky burned red as the sun rose. They trained on the rocky plain outside the village, her body drenched in sweat, her hair sticking to her face. She lifted her stick, her arms shaking. "Strike!" the human ordered. She struck at the wooden post he had planted in the ground. The sound echoed weakly. Again! She struck again. Harder, louder. The vibration stung her palms, but she clenched her teeth. Again! She screamed this time, swinging with all her strength. The stick cracked against the post. A loud snap echoed, and to her shock, the top half of the post splintered and broke off. She froze, her chest heaving, her hands numb. She stared at the broken wood, her eyes wide. I did that," she whispered. The human stepped forward, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "Yes," he said. "That was not weakness. That was you." Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She had never broken anything before. She had always been the one broken. Now she had destroyed something with her own strength. Her voice shook. "But how?" The human crouched beside the broken post, running his hand over the splinters. "Because you stopped holding back," he said. "Inside you is strength greater than they ever believed. You only needed to believe it first." She clutched the stick tighter, her hands trembling, half in fear, half in wonder, her breath shaky. "If they see this, they will not laugh," she whispered almost to herself. The human's voice hardened. "Not yet, Lyra, you are not ready. Power without control is dangerous. If you want the galaxy to remember your name, you must master this power, not let it master you." That night, as the fire burned low, she could not sleep. She kept seeing the broken post, hearing the snap again and again, her mind filled with questions, fear, and excitement. Was this my true self all along? The next day, training grew harsher. The human demanded more swings, faster runs, harder strikes. Sometimes she collapsed, her body begging to stop, but every time she stood, she remembered the broken post and felt that spark again. One evening, while practicing near the river, something unexpected happened. A group of older alien boys from the village appeared. They had mocked her all her life, and now they laughed again, pointing at her. "Look at the weak child pretending to be a warrior," one sneered. "Does the human think he can turn trash into a blade?" Their laughter cut deep, sharper than any blade. Lyra's hands shook, her chest tight, old shame returning. But the human stood silent, watching, waiting. One of the boys stepped forward, shoving her shoulder. "Show us your strength, broken one, or admit you are nothing." Her eyes burned, her breath ragged. Anger surged inside her like fire. For the first time, she did not step back. She gripped the stick and swung. The air cracked with the sound. The stick slammed against a nearby tree, splintering bark and shaking leaves loose. The boys froze, their laughter cut short, their eyes wide. One of them stumbled back. She broke it," he stammered. Lyra's chest heaved, her arms trembling, but her eyes blazed with something new, something fierce. She raised the stick again, ready to strike once more. The boys ran, shouting in panic, their voices fading into the distance. Silence filled the clearing. The only sound was her breath, heavy and sharp. She lowered the stick slowly, staring at her own hands. "I scared them," she whispered in disbelief. The human stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with quiet pride. "Not because of fear," he said, "but because they saw what I already knew. You are not weak. You are becoming strong." Her lips parted. Her heart pounded. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of power, not shame. That night she sat by the fire, her stick across her lap, the human sharpening a blade nearby. She whispered softly, almost afraid of her own words, "If I keep training, will they all fear me one day?" The human looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his steady eyes. "Yes," he said, "but more than that, they will respect you, and respect lasts longer than fear." She nodded slowly, holding the stick tighter, her eyes fixed on the flames. For the first time, she did not feel like a broken child. She felt like a warrior waiting to be born. And somewhere in the night, the stars above seemed to burn brighter, as if they, too, had noticed the hidden power that had finally begun to awaken. The village slept under a silver moon, quiet and calm. But calm never lasted long on this world. Lyra sat near the dying fire, holding her stick across her knees. Her eyes heavy from training, her body sore. She was about to drift into sleep when the sound came. Shouts, footsteps, the clash of metal. Her head snapped up, her heart racing. Smoke rose from the far edge of the village. The cries of fear filled the night raiders. The human grabbed his blade, his voice sharp and steady. "Lyra, stay close." She stood, her stick trembling in her hands. Fear flooded her chest. Her mind screamed to run, to hide, to curl up and wait. But the human's voice pulled her back. "No hiding tonight," he said. "Stand with me." Her breath caught, her eyes wide. "But I'm not ready," she whispered. "No one is ever ready for their first battle," he replied. "You learn by standing, not by hiding." The fire in his voice gave her strength. Even as her knees shook, they ran toward the smoke. The village was chaos. Huts burning, villagers screaming, raiders in dark armor cutting through the streets, their blades flashing under the moonlight. The human moved with calm precision, his blade flashing, his strikes clean and deadly. One raider fell, then another, his every move sharp like a storm. Lyra froze, her stick tight in her hands, fear choking her throat. A raider turned toward her, his eyes glowing red through his mask. He charged. Her body refused to move. Her legs locked, she saw death coming. Then the human's voice thundered, "Lyra, strike!" Something inside her snapped. Her arms moved before her mind could stop them. She swung with a scream. The stick cracked against the raider's head. The sound echoed. The man stumbled back, dazed. Her own eyes widened in shock. "I hit him. I stopped him." The raider snarled and raised his blade, ready to cut her down, but the human was there in an instant. His sword flashing, the raider collapsed at her feet. Her chest heaved, her heart pounding like a drum. She stared at her trembling hands, the stick dripping with splinters of wood. "You stood," the human said quickly. "Now stand again." "The battle isn't over." More raiders came, 5, 6. The human cut through them with brutal skill. But there were too many. One slipped past his guard and rushed at Lyra. Fear threatened to choke her again. But this time she swung without waiting for orders. The stick struck the raider's arm. He roared, his weapon clattering to the ground. She struck again, harder, faster, her scream cutting the night. She was no longer the broken child. She was fighting. The villagers saw her, their eyes wide in disbelief. The weak girl, the insult gift, standing with the human against raiders. One of the villagers shouted, "She fights!" Another gasped, "The broken one fights!" The words filled her ears like fire. Her fear slowly twisted into something else, rage. She swung again, her strikes clumsy but full of raw strength. The raider stumbled back, beaten by a child no one believed in. The human cut down the last of the attackers nearby. He turned and saw her standing tall, her chest heaving, her stick raised high. His lips curved slightly. Not a smile, but close. "Good," he said. "Very good." The battle raged on, fires spreading, screams echoing. But everywhere the raiders turned, they saw two figures, one human with a blade like death, and beside him, a small alien girl with a stick who refused to fall. At last the raiders broke, retreating into the night, dragging their wounded. Leaving the village in smoke and ruin, silence followed, broken only by the crackling of burning huts. Villagers crawled out from hiding, their eyes wide as they stared at Lyra. She stood in the middle of the street, her body shaking, her stick splintered. Her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes burned with fire. "She fought," someone whispered. "The weak child fought," another voice added. "No, not weak, not anymore." Lyra dropped the stick, her hands aching, her breath sharp. She turned to the human, her voice trembling. I did it." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm, his voice steady. "Yes, Lyra. Tonight you fought, tonight you stood. This is only the beginning." Tears filled her eyes. Not from pain, not from shame, but from pride. For the first time in her life she had fought, and the galaxy had taken notice, as the villagers whispered her name in awe. The broken child of insult had taken her first step into legend. The village still smelled of smoke, the ashes of the raid hanging in the air for many days. But something else lingered too, whispers. The villagers whispered her name. Lyra, the girl once mocked as broken, the girl once laughed at as useless. She had stood in battle. She had struck with her own hands, and people had seen it, but whispers are dangerous. Whispers travel faster than fire. Soon nearby villages heard the story. Soon raiders heard the story, and even the warlords who once mocked her began to hear. The human knew this, that was why he trained her harder than ever. What you did was only the first step, he said. If you stop now, they will laugh again. But if you rise higher, they will never laugh again. And so her training grew harsher. She no longer swung her stick just 50 times, but hundreds until her arms felt like stone. She no longer ran until her legs ached. She ran until her legs refused to move. Her body screamed, her chest burned. But she refused to stop. Every bruise became a lesson. Every scar became a mark of pride. The villagers who once spat at her now watched with wide eyes. Some even followed her at a distance, whispering, "She trains like no one else." Months passed. The seasons turned and Lyra's body changed. Her arms grew stronger, her legs faster, her eyes sharper. But the biggest change was not her body. It was her heart. The broken child who once cried in shame now burned with fire. She no longer whispered, "I will not stop." She shouted it as she trained, her voice echoing in the empty fields. One night, as they sat by the fire, her stick resting across her lap, she turned to the human. "When I struck that raider, I felt something," she said, her voice low. It was not just fear, it was power. The human's gaze was steady. "Power is dangerous, Lyra. If you use it only for anger, you will destroy yourself. But if you use it with control, you will destroy your enemies." Her eyes burned. Her small fists clenched. "Then teach me to control it," she said. "Teach me to be more than what they expect," and so he did. He taught her to strike with speed, not just strength. He taught her to read her opponent's eyes, to move before they moved, to stand even when her body wanted to fall. Sometimes she failed. Sometimes she collapsed in the dirt, but each time, the human pulled her back to her feet. Again, he ordered, and again she rose soon. The villagers no longer whispered with doubt. They whispered with awe. They saw her climb cliffs with her bare hands. They saw her lift stones heavier than her body. They saw her spar with men twice her size and not fall. And one night, when raiders came again, they did not find the same girl they had faced before. Lyra stood in the center of the street, her stick now replaced with a sharpened staff, her eyes burning, the villagers hiding behind her. The raiders laughed, but the laughter died quickly when she charged. She moved faster than they expected, her strike sharp, her body low, her scream cutting the night. One raider fell, then another, their blood staining the dirt. The villagers gasped. The human watched closely, his sword cutting down those who slipped past her. But he did not step in to save her this time. He let her fight, and she did. She fought like a storm, her staff striking heads, breaking arms, sweeping legs, her body moving with fury and rhythm. The raiders who once mocked her name now fled into the darkness. When the battle ended, silence followed. The villagers stepped out, their eyes wide, their mouths open. They no longer saw a weak girl, they saw a warrior. "She is not broken," one whispered. "She is rising." The human placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but strong. "Tonight you were not just surviving, Lyra. Tonight you became what they never believed possible." Her chest heaved, her staff still stained with blood, her eyes burning brighter than ever. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Let them laugh now, soon they will fear." And the galaxy, though far away, had already begun to listen. Years passed, and the name Lyra spread far beyond the small village where she was once mocked. At first it was only whispers, stories of a weak girl who stood in battle, of a broken child who struck raiders with a wooden stick. But whispers became tales, and tales became warnings. Warlords who once laughed at the insult now clenched their teeth when her name was spoken. Merchants in faraway cities told of villages saved by a girl with burning eyes. Raiders whispered of their comrades broken by her staff. And slowly the galaxy began to tremble. Lyra was no longer a child. Her body lean and powerful, her eyes sharp, her movements fast like lightning. She carried not a stick, but a long silver spear crafted by her own hands under the human's guidance. Every strike of that spear carried the weight of her journey. The human walked beside her, older now, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes still steady, still proud. He watched as the one given to him as an insult had become something greater than even he imagined. One night, news came that a great warlord, the same who had once handed her to the human as a joke, was marching with his army, burning villages, enslaving families, and laughing as the galaxy bent to his will. The villagers begged Lyra to hide, to stay safe, but she stood tall, her spear in hand. "I will not hide," she said, her voice strong. "I will fight not only for myself, but for all who were ever called weak, for all who were ever thrown away." The human placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice calm. Then this will be the battle that defines you. The army came at dawn. The ground shaking under their boots, the warlord sat high on a black beast, his armor shining, his voice booming across the plain. Bring me the weak child, the broken gift. Let me end this lie with my own hands. But what rose to meet him was no broken child. It was a warrior. Her eyes blazing, her spear gleaming, her voice cutting through the roar of thousands. I am Lyra, she shouted, and I will not break. The battle began, the sky filled with smoke. The clash of steel rang across the land. The human cut through enemies with sharp precision, but it was Lyra who drew every eye. She moved like fire, her spear flashing, her strikes breaking shields, her scream echoing. She fought not only with strength, but with fury born of years of shame, years of pain, years of laughter that had tried to bury her. Soldiers who faced her fell one by one, their fear spreading faster than blood. Whispers grew among them even as they fought. She cannot be stopped, she is not weak, she is death. And then she faced him, the warlord who had once sneered as he threw her away. His blade heavy, his armor strong, his laughter cruel. So the insult still breathes, he mocked, raising his weapon. Then die as the joke you are. But Lyra did not step back. She charged, her spear flashing, their weapons clashed, sparks flying. His strength was great, but hers was relentless, each strike heavier than the last. He roared in anger, slashing, pushing, but she refused to fall. The human's voice echoed in her memory. Fail 1,000 times, but one day you will not fail. Her arms burned, her chest heaved, but she struck again. This time her spear piercing through his guard. Slamming into his chest, the warlord staggered, his laughter dying, his eyes wide in shock. The battlefield went silent. Thousands watching as the mighty warlord fell to his knees before the very girl he once called worthless. With one final cry, she drove her spear through him. The ground shook. His body collapsed and the army broke in terror. Fleeing into the smoke, silence followed, broken only by the whispers, then the cheers. The villagers shouted her name. The soldiers cried in disbelief, and across the stars, the story of Lyra spread like fire. She stood over the fallen warlord, her chest rising and falling, her spear dripping with victory. She turned and saw the human watching. His eyes filled not only with pride, but with something deeper. Peace, he stepped forward, his voice carrying across the quiet battlefield. They gave me an insult, he said, but today, that insult has become the warrior the galaxy fears. Tears stung her eyes, but she did not bow her head this time. She raised her spear high, and the sky itself seemed to tremble. From that day on, warlords spoke her name with fear. Raiders fled at the sound of her footsteps, and the galaxy whispered a truth that could not be denied. The broken child was no more. She had risen, and the galaxy trembled before her.